Good morning, Southern Baptist Convention family. We represent over 2,000 Asian churches across North America with a membership of over 175,000. We're so blessed to be in partnership with you, where a convention that we believe, and we do believe that you embrace different ethnicity, where ethnicity and diversity is celebrated, and we're grateful for that. Together we can do more than apart. Today we're going to talk about a very important topic within our Asian culture, within our Asian context, and how we can integrate the emerging and potential leaders that we're developing within our local churches and within our community. And today, I have invited key pastors across Southern Baptist Convention to help us tackle and answer main different questions, but it's important for us to start talking about it. And let me begin with Pastor William Ng. He is considered the godfather of all of the Chinese-speaking, English-speaking ministers across our Californians Chinese Baptist Fellowship, and grateful to have him. And Pastor Victor Chayasirisobhon, the Director of Mission of Orange County Association, the current president of the California Southern Baptist Convention. He's wearing different hats, and we're grateful to have him with us. Nate Vedoya, from born and raised in Canada, but he's a church planting catalyst in Edmonton, and working alongside all of the Asian church planters and potential church planter reach the community of the vast Asian community in Canada. And last but not the least, Dr. Ryan Lee, whom I met just last year. And I think he's considered as the youngest Korean minister in Korean Council Southern Baptist Fellowship, pastoring maybe the largest Korean church out there in Dallas, Texas. And friends, thank you for joining us, and those who are listening and watching us. Lola, let's continue discussing the important topic of the season, and we're growing. The nation's fastest growing racial or ethnic group, according to the Pew Research, for the past 10 years, growing about 83%, is experiencing generational and cultural challenges. What are the realities you face within your ministry context that the Asian church should address now? And let me begin with Pastor Ng and Victor next, Nate, and Pastor Lee.
Well, after 35 years of ministry at one church, I realized that the Chinese church has to deal with the issue about having a pastor, one pastor. And when I became the associate pastor, none of the members wanted to call me a pastor. And so this is one of the needs of our Asian American churches. We have to recognize that even though we are Christian, there's a Confucius motto that says you respect elders. And yet, there is no respect sometimes for the English ministers in those Asian churches. So I believe that we need to work on that, teach our first generation how to accept the new minister that is involved with the NextGen.
Amen, amen. And I got that phrase, respect the English-speaking ministers. Pastor Victor, in your Asian context.
No, absolutely. At our church, I pastor the First Southern Baptist Church of Anaheim, but my mother church, where my dad pastors, the Thai Church in California, also meets there. And so we definitely still have first and second generational issues. And again, with sometimes the first generation is always right, even if they're not always right. And so in our culture, that respect is very, very important. And so hopefully teaching the first generation that the second generation's opinions have value too, but also raising the second generation to be patient, because love is patient and love is kind, and to have that respect and to work together and to stay together, because, again, a family should stay together.
Family should stay together. Nate, you're born and raised in Canada. How does it look like in your context in Canada?
Yeah, so one of the main differences we see in Canada versus the United States is that in the United States you celebrate this idea of a melting pot, whereas in Canada we celebrate this mosaic. And so we're encouraged to stay within our cultures and practice our beliefs and systems and whatnot, but at the same time, growing up in Canada, there is certainly identity crisis, right? We call that the Mulan effect. When will my reflection show who I am inside? And we see that happening between the generations, a discombobulation, if you will, of who I am, who am I supposed to be? And not only are we struggling with our ethnic identity, but in Canada, because we've been staying in our lanes, we also struggle with who we are as a Canadian. And so the question that we pose to both the first generation and even the second generation is, how do we retrain our mind to think missionally, if that be our focus and our purpose? And if we're going to retrain our mind, what does that mean for us to, release as opposed to restrain? We're constantly restraining, but now how do we have the mindset of releasing?
Amen and amen. And with Dr. Ryan Lee, this is a very different context, because the three of you, Pastor Ang, born and raised in America, Victor and Nate, born and raised in Canada, Dr. Ryan Lee, born and raised in South Korea, educated there,
Right.
and served there, and then transitioned to be the youngest senior pastor of the largest Korean church
Right.
out there in Dallas. And share us a little bit about that cultural and generational challenges that your context is facing.
Right. I was born and raised in South Korea, and then came to the United States when I was a college student for the first time. So all my English and all those cultural learning started from college years. And it's fascinating that so many people are moving in, migrating, and we have immigrant churches and migration, like flux in, like a lot of people coming in Dallas and Texas and Austin these days, because Tesla, Samsung, all coming. I think it's a really important, good opportunity for us to evangelize for Asian Americans. I think it's interesting that Nate mentioned that we're quite mosaic in Texas too, rather than melting pot, even in the United States. Yes. We've been saying Korean American or Japanese American or Filipino American, but these days, interestingly, we often say Asian American, and a lot of times, Asian American become one of the cooperative group of being Asian. So I think it's a good that we share that Asianness rather than each country or each ethnicity and the nationality. So now we can do more of a Asian evangelism and beyond in this society. I think it's a good opportunity at this point. Yeah.
Well, that's very interesting mention about Asian American, not necessarily Filipino or your specific ethnicity. And didn't you know, Southern Baptist Convention family, that we represent over 20 or 27 Asian nationalities within our churches? And so you're talking about a multi-ethnicity within the term or the name tag that they call us Asian American. And it's unbelievable. But we have our own differences in terms of how we see and approach the context. And let me move on to the next question. If the Asian population is becoming younger, according to the research, Generation Z, those who are like 22 years old down, 6 in 10, and there's about 58% are US born Asians, and this is in 2019. Maybe this is similar to what's happening in Canada as well. And many Asian churches at present are lagging, catching up with the reality of that growing so fast. Now, where do you see generational leadership integration fits in the equation? And then with the question, what are the best practices you implement or consider adopting in your ministry context? And so two couple of questions there. Where does integration fits in? And what's the best practice and so far that you have been seeing work well within your context? So let me begin with Victor.
Yeah, excellent question. Thank you, Peter. I think that we got to remember that when we're planting churches and doing ministry together, this is about the King of Kings. This is not about Game of Thrones, right? And sometimes we're doing this like Game of Thrones, and people are trying to hold on to their seat. Well, again, we worship the King, and he sits on his throne, and we serve him. And so as these younger generations are being born and are growing in size, right, in our churches, we need to train up the leaders that are there to pastor them so that they also feel valued. When I first started my church 17 years ago now, wow, getting a little bit older, right? A couple years in, a young man named Pastor Josh Sanchez started to emerge, and he became our youth pastor. Well, at that time, I think I was 29 years old, and he was 19. But at that point, I already started thinking of him as somebody who would start to replace me one day when I was 29 years old. I mean, we start to think about these things when we're way older. Jesus went to the cross when he was what, 33, right?
That's right.
And so, but we don't start to think about these things until sometimes we're 63, 73, or even 83. And then what happens? As a director of missions like me in Orange County, you come to me at 83 and say, I don't know what to do. I don't have anybody to help serve alongside me. All the young people are gone. It's because you waited too long. So this is not Game of Thrones. This is about the throne and about the King of Kings.
Amen and amen. Because, yes, you said we waited too long. Nate?
Yeah, I really appreciate your comments on that because, again, it's not about our little kingdom. It's not about being territorial or tribalistic in our mentality, but having that kingdom mindset. And so, Peter, just to tackle that question that you've asked, in our context, what we see is that starting at a young age, we're already seeing collaborative, kingdom-minded, intentional discipleship. So we're already merging churches, and we're saying, okay, you're African, you're Chinese, you're Korean, you're Canadian. And so we want, at a very young age, to train you to be an influencer in your society. So how does that look? What does that look like for you to work together? Because our kids today are growing up in a different environment than what we've grown up, even from what I've grown up in. And so our influence in the home is not as strong as it once was. The influence in the school, the influence in the workplace is so much more bombarding. And so how do we, at a young age, already get them integrating, working together towards kingdom-minded activity? And so when they're older, it already makes sense for them to plant a church, a multi-ethnic church together. We're not looking at me to be the next Stephen Curry. You know, I'm 44. I can't drop a shot for the life of me. But we're looking at the 13-year-old kid that's practicing day in and day out, and we're saying we want to invest in that kid.
Amen, amen, amen. Ryan?
I think along the side, I often emphasize that we should find a model from the Bible. Joseph and Apostle Paul, they're all bilingual, bicultural. Egypt and Hebrew culture, and for Apostle Paul, Roman citizen, and he often preached in Aramaic and in his own language with the fathers and brothers and fathers. So being bilingual, bicultural, or trilingual, tricultural is also important, but at the same time, what we learn from that, I want our next generation leaders to be really integrating other cultures, not just me as a Korean American and Asian American, period, but we are also the United States citizen, and we are a part of the community here, and we really serve and give, and we do whatever we can do for the preaching the gospel. And Apostle Paul did it for Roman citizens, for their own people, Hebrew people, and Greek Hellenistic people with the using the foreign gods, Greek gods illustration. So if we can use all these cultural pipeline, not changing the main core message of the gospel, we can integrate the cultures, and who can be flexible with those cultures and those linguistic barriers, I think they can be the next gen leader. So I expect that, and I pray for that.
Amen and amen. And Pastor Ryan, you live in that context, and you went through with it at a very young age, and then now you're in a position that you will multiply yourself, right?
Try my best.
With Pastor Ang, it's very interesting because born and raised in America, and then at early age in the early 1990s, you get a chance to be the senior pastor. You couldn't even preach fluently in Cantonese or Mandarin, and you're the senior pastor of the Chinese Baptist Church.
So I think that part of it is that we have to demonstrate our integrity, that we are indeed God's servant in the church, and that we need to learn to model to our people that we want to work with them and not just be our own pastor for our own congregation. In our church, we try to give good expository teaching to our young people and then sound doctrine. One of our workers came back and he says, we learned so much in this church, we want to replicate it wherever we are serving. So out of our church, we've had over a dozen people serving in the NextGen ministry. And so that's why it's important that we start to get them involved, look at their spiritual gifts. We allow them to experience missional opportunities in the church as well as outside of the church. And it helps the NextGen too to work with their parents. So we have whole family going on mission trips. Pastor Victor and our church has done many joint mission trips together down to the Native American reservation. So when they're exposed to another culture, they see that they need to be able to be accepting not only their own children's culture, but as well as other cultures. And one of the things that I've been trying to help other pastors, first-generational pastors, is to realize that they are like a prophet to the people. They need to speak truth to the people who are in their congregation, especially the NextGen. And then some of them need a bishop to direct them to find out how to do ministry. Some of them need a priest. They need healing. And we have some of those young people that need that. And then there are some who are very experienced, mature. They need a colleague to work with them and let them be equal in the ministry. So we've seen the good benefit of mentoring. And so this is why I think that's one of the benefits of doing that.
Amen, amen. I like that approach, Pastor Ng. It is a holistic ministry that we need each other in the ministry, whether you're first generation, second, or 1.5 or second or third generation, we need each other so that we can reach all generation and all cultural differences. I'm moving to the last one, but this is very important too. I want you to address the over 50,000 churches that are watching, listening, and I want you to make an appeal of SBC has over 2,000 Asian churches, and you know that. Now, how do you see your church role or ministry can contribute to making a difference in the SBC life and ministry? And how can the SBC partner with Asian churches in developing emerging Asian next-gen leaders? As I said, we are here, we are your family, we are Southern Baptists. We don't want to just listening and sitting in the corner. We wanted to contribute. We wanted to engage the life and the ministry of Southern Baptists. Let me begin with Nate Vedoya.
Going back to what I was saying earlier, just this idea that we need to retrain, release, as opposed to restrain. And I think we need to provide more R&D opportunities, research and development, opportunities where we can come together, try different things, experiment, allow ourselves to make mistakes. Because I believe that the second generation ethnics, Asian Americans, Asian Canadians, are wired in a certain way where they have the Western mindset, they have the ability to think critically about certain facts, but they have the soft skills that are required to bring community together, to bridge relationships, to bridge cultures. And so in an incredibly polarized world that we're living in, that is what we need to see happen. And so if we can provide these atmospheres where we can bring people together to discuss, to experiment, to try, just throw something at the wall to see what sticks, and then we can develop a missional perspective for what the next 40 years looks like. And so again, I think that's just one of the things I appeal to my Asian brothers, but also to the SBC as a whole.
Well, straightforwardly, we would like to serve more, and we would like to I think I would like to have more opportunity to serve the SBC like this one and beyond. So I think it'll be great and privilege for anyone who can work together for the gospel, for the kingdom. Even though we're different in race or color, we're all working for the gospel. So let's work together.
Amen. Pastor Ng.
I'm so thankful that our association director of mission recruited me to serve in the association as a VBS instructor, and then the state convention also invited me to serve to help them with their clinics and Sunday school training. So they gave me the opportunity, and so this is why I'm thankful I can be involved. And I want to encourage our own people to do likewise, to get those opportunities to serve by explaining what the association is doing, what the state convention, what the Southern Baptist Convention is doing, so that I can be a part of it. So, and I ended up serving on the committee of committees for the Southern Baptist Convention, and they wanted me to find people from California to serve. And so I learned a lot during those years of being exposed to Southern Baptist work.
Absolutely. I would say this to all my Asian American churches and Asian churches. If you want to help the SBC, it's very simple. Send messengers, all right? Send them to their state convention. Send them to the association meetings. Send them to the national convention, like right
Amen.
here, all right? And then be ready to serve, because some of us are trying to break through these barriers so that it's not so abnormal, so that you guys are here and so that you can serve. Be ready to do that, and you can see that there is space and there is availability for all of us here at the table. And in terms of the SBC helping our churches, again, they have really evolved to understand many of the Asian American and Asian contexts in things like church planning as they do their assessment, and of course the different things that the International Mission Board does as well. So it's a family. We stick together, we help each other, all right, and we learn together.
Amen and
Amen.
amen. Gentlemen, thank you for allowing us to serve alongside you. To the Southern Baptist Convention family, we are here to serve. We are here at your expense, and we're a family. We will do this together. We can do better together. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pastor Peter.
God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you.
God bless.